Hello, hello. So in this session, we're going to be talking about seniors in the workplace, how workplaces have adapted or have not. But before we launch into that first question, I want a little help defining seniors. Because Sharon, as you said, what we're doing when we say the word seniors is essentially grouping together 50 plus years of living in a way that we don't do for other age groups. You know, when you talk about teens, very narrow window. When you talk about people in their 20s, it's a decade. But right. When we talk about seniors, it's this massive, massive collection of people who are actually going through very different things. So how do we define it?
Well, the problem is we need to define it. I used to feel, my parents recently passed, but I was in my 60s and they're in my 90s, and I said, how can we both be seniors? We don't even see the world the same way. Oh my God, it's like a total difference. So, I mean, we created as 50s being senior, and AARP, started that concept because people did die earlier at 65, but it's so transformed. So we need a new lexicon. I mean, you can't, first of all, seniors is a very negative connotation. You say someone's a senior at 50, they say, don't you dare call me a senior. That's one of the reasons I use vintage in my work model. But we really need to change, maybe become, I say, a vintager. Someone who has vintage experience from 50 to 75, and maybe when you turn 75, you finally become a senior. But I think you can't lump from 50-year-olds to 100-year-olds and think that they're in the exact same group, because they're totally different from one end of the spectrum.
Tom, do you agree with that?
You know, we've had a somewhat different avenue into this, because we started out with the question of technology adoption. So about 15 years ago, I founded this nonprofit, Older Adults Technology Services, and we were really getting at that issue around how to get people to learn the new technologies and the internet and email and things like that. And we just called it Older Adults Technology Services because that seemed like a fairly neutral term. And ever since starting, every month or so I end up in a conversation about what do we call this group and how do we define it. And we simply fixated on the beginning start date of 60 years and older, and have used that as the sort of catchment area, which is much broader than other people might consider. But it works for us because our model is that we've created these centers that we call Senior Planet Centers. There's one here on 25th Street about 5 blocks from here, and in case I'm getting nodding heads out here in case people want to visit later. But we just mix together anybody over 60, and we'll get people sitting right next to each other that are 61 years old and 85 or 90 years old. And because they're collaborating on common projects, they'll be starting a business together, or they're taking an exercise class, or they're learning how to attach emails. They collaborate and they work real well together. So it hasn't really been much of a problem in terms of definition. And I always think of the word senior as a positive thing. When you're a senior in college, you're in the older group, and people look up to you. And a senior expert is somebody who has more experience, and so it can be a neutral term, and we are trying to recapture that a little bit.
Well, I see on the other side, working with companies, that senior is a negative. Sorry. It means that they may not have the technology skills, they may not be as alert or as active, and there's obviously, because it has that negative connotation, and so when you're looking to have people continue to work longer in a corporate environment, or for a company, there's a problem with using the word senior. And somebody who's 60, who's just leaving a job, may have been working with 3 monitors, is totally technologically savvy because they had to be on the job, or somebody who's 75, who retired a while ago, may not have that kind of skill. So when you're looking to really place to keep people working as they age, because they're going to need to in a better way, you have to be careful, again, how you use that language when you're dealing with, like, corporate America, as opposed to entrepreneurs, because they don't care. They're like, I'm doing this no matter what, because I'm great. I know.
Right. So
one quick follow-on real quickly.
Yeah.
We do an entrepreneurship fair at Senior Planet twice a year, and we actually tag it as Buy Old. Because we think of that as a good thing. It's a social mission, a social purpose. But you're absolutely right that at times that if you're applying for a job and you don't want to highlight your age, you may take your graduation year off the resume for that particular application, and present yourself in more neutral terms if you don't want that to be an issue. So it really depends on the context. As a social mission organization, we tend to bring senior right to the front and try to recapture it.
So I'm wondering, do you guys think that the American economy, that the labor force has adapted at all to accommodate older Americans? And what are some of the key things that need to change for it to become a more hospitable, friendly place for older Americans who, as you said, need to continue working longer?
Well, from my perspective, what I see, there are a number of companies who are forward-thinking. who actually have put in flexible work environments and have programs where there are people who want to phase into retirement, can work part-time, can be work even on a consulting basis. The issue, though, is that they haven't made the leap that they don't also need to come into an office. When people want to retire, I mean, I say that they really don't want to retire from work. They really want to retire from the office. And most work today is knowledge work. That could be that you're working on a computer and you can work from anywhere. So I don't think the companies yet have adapted to allowing them also to work from home, which would give them so much more flexibility, much better life-work balance. And then there are a lot of companies who absolutely don't see the value. They just see the high price tag, and they don't even, but those companies typically don't even give flexible work to their own employees. So you see a big, schism across the, the corporate environment.
Yeah.
We've been around long enough now that over the last 15 years, we've seen a little bit of a cycle. When we first started, there was this concern about the job skills mismatch, where the economy had been growing rapidly, and there were a lot of unfilled jobs with certain skill sets that were needed, and people were beginning to draw older adults back into the workforce, and places like AARP were calling out that opportunity to help people be productive and fill some economic challenges as well. And then when the recession hit, of course, there was a pullback economically, and seniors got driven out of the workforce. And the research that I saw was that while the unemployment rates may have been about the same, older adults were taking twice as long to get back into the workforce once they had been displaced during the recession. And now, as the economy has been heating up again, that demand is coming back, and people are looking for older adults who can, the literacy rates are higher, the discipline at work is there, or the ability to show up and do certain things. Customer service orientation is really strong. Relationships and networks and technical knowledge are really specialized. And so people are looking to make those adaptations. But again, the big word here is ageism, which is lying like a bit of a blanket on top of all of this, that many employers have negative stereotypes about aging that they have to overcome, and we have to help them do that, because that really does create a hindrance.
Mm-hmm. Sharon, so I'm wondering, part of what you do, and I want you to talk a little bit about the model of your business and then also why you chose the word vintage. But what are the skills that people are seeking on both sides? What are the skills that seniors are looking to get out there, and what are the skills that businesses are looking for?
So what we have, first of all, let me tell you why I chose vintage, work-at-home vintage experts. I certainly didn't want to call us work-at-home senior experts, because that would have been like negative. And I started this 8 years ago, so maybe there's some transformation. Back 8 years ago, that was like a total no-no. And I said, well, what else, what are we? People love vintage cars, vintage wines. They recognize the value of them. So I didn't want to use silver either. It just sounds, the connotation was just not the right one. So that's why we named it Vintage Experts. And what we found, there's hundreds of thousands of amazing people across this country who did all the knowledge work for every single company. They could be HR people, they could be accounting people. Every company has bookkeepers or accounting staff and HR staff and all kinds of other administrative staff that has amazing knowledge in that industry. And so what we've tried to do is recognize that people after 30 years of stressful office, driving to work, we hear it all the time, hours in the car, I'm sick of the drive, I really want to retire from the office and not from work. So we said, well, then you're really not retired. To me, that's like an oxymoron. If you're working, how can you be retired? So we call it pre-tiree. We say they're pre-tirees, that they're phasing into retirement, working from home. And on the client side, what we have found is in certain industries, there is not enough institutional knowledge. We have now almost zero unemployment, and we also have a big knowledge gap in many industries as so many boomers retire. And so companies can't find that talent in their backyard. And so the concept behind what we wanted to do is capture these amazing people who have, you're right, a fabulous network. They have maintained friendships throughout their industry and their career. They can reach out to people. They can mentor the young people in the workforce. And to qualify them exactly to their area skill set, so what do you want to do now? What would be the best job with the knowledge you have and the network you have? And then find companies who have that talent gap and tell them, look, we have amazing people. And because they never meet them, they work remotely from home. It's almost like blind hiring because we totally qualify them. And nobody knows really how old they are. They just know they're over 50, because that's what we say on our website. It's for people over 50. So they don't know if they're 75. They just know they have the most amazing skill set. And they tell us that they're equal to or more productive than people in their office. They're 75% more knowledgeable than people in their office, and that they make amazing mentors.
Yeah. Tom, I think there are a lot of people out there who have this false and negative stereotype about older Americans and technology, that they don't know how to use it, that they're not interested in learning how to use it, and that if you try to teach them how to use it, they won't be able to catch on quickly. What has been your actual experience doing that kind of professionally?
I love this question. One way to put this is that the problem that people have with seniors learning technology is usually a problem that people have with their parents. It has nothing to do with the technology. It's that you have an issue with your mom, and when she asks you for help, all of those years of difficulty and challenge that have risen, bubbled below the surface of the family start coming out. So I would encourage people to work on their relationships first. And the technology learning for us is really, there's a couple of different patterns of it. A lot of older people come in the door and they say, to us anyways, I was kind of waiting on the sidelines of this technology era, thinking that it would, by the time I passed away, I wouldn't really need it. And then as they live longer and longer and longer, the good news is that they're 85 and they're still coming out and doing things. And the bad news is, of course, they need to get an email account to connect and start looking into Facebook and Instagram while they're at it. For people that are real beginners, it is like learning a language. And we say you have to learn it in context. It takes about 3 months to really make any real progress, and 6 months to get good at it, just like if you were learning Spanish to start to get some conversationality. And so set yourself up to succeed. And so we run these Senior Planet Centers in New York, and now we're building them in Denver, and we have one in upstate New York and in San Antonio. And those give people a place to really learn safely in an age-relevant context where we're, doing it at a pace that people get it. The other side of the equation, though, is that one of the really exciting things for working in the nonprofit sector on this is how many people come in the door who are literally on fire. They're just coming in with these great ideas. They've got a book to write, they've got a movie they want to produce, they've got a memoir that they're connecting with, or a group that they're trying to organize on some social purpose, and they're looking for technology for a purpose. And when they do that, the first step around learning takes place, but very quickly people transition into applied utilization. And those conversations are amazing. And so if your mom or dad is starting a business and wants you to help her with the JavaScript on her website, or they're doing a Facebook marketing of a play that somebody wrote, or planning a world trip where they're doing some social engagement work, and they want to connect you on that, then you have an opportunity to access a whole new world of social connection and purpose. And as a young person, that's a gift.
Yeah.
I'd like to add to that, because on the other side,
go ahead.
Because our age range is typically between 50 and 75, and they're amazingly computer literate. Because we give them timed online computer skills assessments, and they know how to browser, they know how to browse. That's why I'm saying there are segments to aging.
Right.
Yep.
And so the younger segment of this cohort happens because they've had to learn it on the job. They've been FaceTiming their grandkids. They have Facebook. They have everything. They shop on Amazon.
Yeah, they're not starting from scratch.
They're not starting from scratch at all. So it enables them to be able to work from home because they understand the technology. They're capable of using it.
Yep.
So it depends on where you're at. They're probably a little older, or I guess you're a 60-year-old.
Our average age is 74.
74, yes.
But we teach people, we just had a student that was 99 years old recently.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's great.
All right, I do want to let our audience know that we're going to come to you in just 1 second for questions. So if you could start thinking about them now, condensing them down, making sure that they are in fact questions and not comments, I would super appreciate that. We'll be right back to you. So we talked a little bit in the beginning about whether or not the U.S. was doing this well, and we talked a little bit about the fact that there are companies, there are industries that are trying this, and Tom, I actually want to start with you because you've been traveling a lot lately. What are the lessons that the U.S. can learn from other countries, other places that are thinking really proactively about how to keep people working and how to successfully integrate older citizens into the workplace?
I think the place where the most progress has been made is in entrepreneurship. There's this general movement towards social entrepreneurship. There's a wonderful global organization called Aging 2.0, which does conferences all over the world which helps entrepreneurs and investors and older adults connect to each other and do projects. And I was in Hong Kong recently. They have a chamber of commerce for social entrepreneurship that's related to a lot of older adults issues. On the workforce side, in terms of pure employment, there are some efforts in places like Spain and the Netherlands where people are doing a little bit of work, but that has been lagging behind. And I think there's a lot of interest in startups and the whole kind of startup culture now, which has a lot of cachet, but the reality is most people are not going to do the startups, and what we're really looking for is opportunities to change the workforce culture and frankly some of the laws. You know, a lot of employment discrimination is related to age, and as a country, the United States really could do a lot more to make an age-friendly environment for workers, and we have a lot of work to do.
And I could add to that because I've had other countries like Germany come to me and say, we really have a severe problem with how to keep our aging workforce working and engaged. They don't know how to deal with it either, and they have a really kind of difficult culture. It's a little, I'm sorry to say, it's a little masculine kind of a culture. So it's hard to break that tradition and think, you know, because taking care of, quotes, older people has a very negative connotation for them. And so I've had a number of countries come and say, well, how can you bring this here? Because we need a methodology we don't have one. Of course, the problem is they first have to change some public policy. It's very difficult in those countries. But so I don't think we're lagging behind other countries. I think they have the same issue that we're facing. And we may even be a little more advanced than they are.
All right, I want to go to the audience in case there are questions. I see one right back there.
Thank you. My name's Howard Reese. My company is called Healthy Practices. I have a question for Tom. If we can agree that internet and email are mainstream now, not really considered new technology, I just wanted to ask you, what new technologies do you see coming down the road that will most benefit older adults?
I love this. I go to the Consumer Electronics Show every year. They're one of our supporters. And the new technologies that are most exciting involve, first of all, a lot of the home automation and Internet of Things technologies are beginning to show real promise as they work out the kinks and start to actually do what they're supposed to do. So I think it makes it easier for people to age in place. Some of the communications technologies, such as even things like FaceTime on the iPad, are becoming mainstream for people and are really helping older people who may have some challenges in terms of hearing, but be able to do better with a FaceTime call are really getting better. I think some of the wearable technologies around health, the Apple Watch, and some of the EKG sort of functions that are beginning to emerge with home-based health monitoring technologies are really promising as well. So it's really a lot of the sort of low-level consumer stuff, but it's actually making it easier for people to live independently.
Do we have any other questions? One way in the back. There's a mic coming to you. Great.
So I'm curious if you're primarily talking about people who already have been in a corporation, for example, and want to move into something that's still connected to that corporation. I was investigating Encore Careers a while back, and those movements I have felt are rather fraudulent because they don't pay anything. It's like $10 an hour, and you're supposed to be, as an older person, sort of socially conscious, which I think older people want to be, but they want to get paid. I'm curious, what do you see in the role of part-time work that is meaningful work, that builds on people's skills? And where is that if you're not already from a corporation? I happen to come from academia, but I'm
Thank you.
Well, you don't need to be, you have to have worked and some knowledge. You have to have whatever your knowledge is. I was just using companies. We have people who've worked in small offices, who just, who did consulting in an area that had unique knowledge. And a lot of the work is part-time. So, and you're right, there's an Encore career where people who were managers in the C-suite can go on and do not-for-profits, and they sort of guide them, what you want to do. But the other biggest segment, a big segment of white-collar knowledge workers, no matter what, have a huge amount of knowledge, and they have institutional knowledge they want to continue to use because that's what they loved, that was their career, and they don't want to start another career. They want to give back that knowledge that they have and continue to feel valued in what they've done in their life.
All right. Well, please join me in thanking our panel.